It's now 4 green arrows in a row for my FPL team, and we have 2 free transfers going into game week 13 and the target of 100k before Christmas. And in this video, we are going to be touching on my transfer plans going into game week 13. So as always, if you're looking forward to it, make sure to drop a like on the video and of course, smash that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. Enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So first up, we need to take a look at how my team is getting on in game week 12, because of course the game week hasn't actually finished yet. We do have the Monday night fixture left between Newcastle and West Ham, and I do have Fabianski left to play in my team. But I'd probably argue if I had to pick one player not to have in this fixture, it probably would be Fabianski. My expectation is probably a 1 pointer. So 65 points for my team right now. Add on the inevitable 1 point for Fabianski, it most likely is going to be 66 points. And coming into game week 12, I was ranked around 490,000 in the world. And as you can see, it's actually been quite a significant green arrow to 357k. Now, of course, we do have the fixture to happen on Monday night, so I imagine it's going to slightly eat into this green arrow, but I imagine I will finish the game week around 400k unless Fabianski picks up a clean sheet and a penalty save. Then we could be creeping into the top 300k, but I imagine it'll be around 400k by the end of this game week. And to be honest with you, if you tuned into my deadline live stream, I spoke about how I would have happily taken a small red arrow because I felt like my team looked okay, but I knew there were a lot of big players that I didn't own going into this game week, including a certain Erling Haaland, who of course, if managers owned him, I really feel bad because of course the swing between Salah and Haaland over the last 3 game weeks has been ridiculous, and I don't think everybody predicted maybe Salah does better, but not to the extent that it has been. So just taking a look at my team quickly, the defence pretty damn woeful. Anderson with a 0-pointer. I really was expecting a better performance from Fulham, but we'll touch on my forwards in a minute because it wasn't all doom and gloom. Dallo with the 2-pointer, quite disappointed by that one, but I was really happy he actually was selected by Amorim in that team and importantly stayed on the pitch for 90 minutes and at times picked up some really attacking positions, so not terrible from Dallo. And of course my one free transfer that I did make was Trent to Gabriel. Really happy I made that move. I always wanted a piece of that Arsenal defence. A Gabriel with the 6-pointer, kind of picking up what we expected from him. Moving into the midfielders. Now, the big decision that I had on my deadline live stream was whether to sell Son and bring in Bukayo Saka. But I spoke about how if we weren't going to get any news whether Saka was officially fit, I was going to keep Son because my expectation was 80 minutes from Son. And even if Saka did play, I imagined around 60-65 minutes. And I was expecting goals in that Spurs game. Now, it kind of worked, kind of didn't, because we got the assist from Son, but he only played 60-odd minutes. And anybody that watched that game, I would argue Son was one of the worst players on that pitch. On the flip side, Saka started, played the kind of minutes we were expecting, but also picked up the goal, assist, and bonus points. So on reflection, Saka was an obvious move, but at the time we had no certainty of him playing. And of course, that is now a player on my radar. Salah with the captaincy haul, just ridiculous. The guy is a joke right now, but quite fortuitous, the points it is worth noting. And Mbeumo and Palmer with the blanks. That's 3 in a row for Palmer. We will need to talk about that one. And Mbeumo as well, going under the radar as a bit of a slump right now in his FPL returns. Finally, the front three, Vissa with the 2-pointer. To be honest with you, we didn't touch on the Brentford red card would impact the team as a whole, but that is going to be a problem for me later down the line. Raul with the 2-pointer. He is basically Muniz 2.0, and I've just bought the other version of him. And Cunha with the 16-pointer. And if it is going to wipe out my Fulham clean sheet, I would happily be for a 16-point haul from Cunha. So 65 points. I did bench Garnacho, and when I saw him start, I was panicking. But the fact that he started is actually a decent indicator for my team going forward. So 65 points. Let me know how many you got in the comment section. Let's take a look at how my team is looking for game week 13 and some of the players that I'm targeting. So here's how my team is looking for game week 13 without any transfers being made. I've got 1.4 million in the bank and 2 free transfers. So I'm in a really good spot going into this game week where I not only have the flexibility of 2 free transfers, but I actually have the luxury of some cash in the bank to take my team into different directions. And it has caused a little bit of a headache going into this game week because sometimes when I only have 0.1 million, it's quite obvious what the move is to be. But there are actually quite a few picks. So just take a look at the team from top to bottom, because I think it's really important to understand which player for this game week is actually great and doesn't require a transfer, because we naturally get tempted by the new shiny toys in the game, the players that have got those double-digit returns in the game week just gone. But we need to reflect and say to ourselves, is the player that I currently own actually good for this game week? And I don't want to be getting all panicky and thinking that I need to get the new guy on the block. So in goal, we got Sells at home against Ipswich. Now, previously, this game looked fantastic, but Forest have had a little bit of a slump. It's worth noting they've played Newcastle and they've played Arsenal. So I would like to think we come back to some sort of normality from Forest and their defenders going into this Ipswich game. But I've also been very impressed with Ipswich as a team, but I do think they are better at home as opposed to away from home. I say that after beating Spurs a couple of weeks ago, but I would like to think there is a good chance of a clean sheet for Sells. I don't like him being my goalkeeper, but I like it for this game week, so it isn't panic stations right now. In terms of the defenders, 8-0 at home against Bournemouth was always the game I wanted to play him in. I do think there is an argument maybe to play Van den Berg at home against Leicester, but the fact they've just got rid of Steve Cooper, there is a good chance that we might get that new manager bounce from them, and I don't really want to be playing a Brentford defender in that game. So 8-0 definitely featuring. Dallow, as I mentioned, played 90 minutes under the first game for Amorim, picked up some really advanced positions, and I'd expect him, I have no reason to believe that he won't play in this game against Everton. So that looks great. I'm happy to hold him. And of course, Gabriel playing away against West Ham. We'll see what West Ham are like tonight, because that might influence a transfer that I might make going into game week 13. So more than happy with the back three. And the way that defenders are right now, I never really want to play a back four ever in any game week. Now, moving into midfielders, I think these look great. We've got Mbeumo at home against Leicester. Now, I know a lot of people are panicking about Mbeumo because the position that he's taking up right now isn't great. His underlying numbers haven't been fantastic. And Leicester, of course, will have either a new manager bounce, we think, or they're at least going to have an interim manager and they might just pick up some sort of impetus in their play. But regardless, whatever you think about the narrative, you cannot be selling Mbeumo before home game against Leicester. So he is staying in the team, but I think it does put me off any sort of captaincy on Mbeumo. Cole Palmer right now at home against Villa. A few people are selling him, it's worth noting. I think it's creeping up to 50,000 transfers out. On another day, Madueke doesn't block that shot on the line and he walks away with some sort of return, and we all talk about captaining him at home against Villa. Villa, remember, playing midweek in the Champions League. Chelsea will be playing in their Europa League, or Conference League, but they have another team, so it isn't going to impact them at all. Palmer, keep. Garnacho was a problem, but him playing significant minutes in the away game against Ipswich suggests to me he could be a great pick for Everton at home. So he is probably going to be a keep. And of course, Salah at home against Man City, absolutely fine. The big one, and the first player of the teams that I've mentioned, is going to be Son at home against Fulham. Now, on reflection, I wish I went a week earlier, brought Saka in, but I felt to myself, if Son plays significant minutes against Man City, then I actually have a decision to make this week, because Fulham at home is a fixture where you could keep Son. Saka away against West Ham, that is the first potential transfer, and I will come on to a little bit of a deep dive in a minute on those. Cunha and Vissa with home games, a little bit concerned about Vissa right now, it is worth noting, and especially when we have someone like a João Pedro back on the menu, we will touch on him. But again, at home against Leicester, I brought in Vissa for this fixture a few weeks ago, so I can't really be selling him, I don't think. And Cunha at home against Bournemouth, absolutely fine. So I actually think if I had to roll the transfer again, it is absolutely fine. But I want to touch on some players now that I do think could come into this team. So the first big decision that I need to make going into game week 13 is, do I sell Son and buy Bukayo Saka? Now, of course, we need to caveat this by saying that both of these players and teams are going to feature midweek. Saka is going to be away against Sporting Lisbon on Tuesday night, and Son is going to be home against Roma on the Thursday. So a little bit of travelling to be had from Arsenal and Saka, and they also feature on the Saturday, whereas Son plays on the Thursday, but then plays on the Sunday with that home fixture against Fulham. And first, it's worth noting the fixtures that they actually have coming up. And for Spurs, I think they have a very mixed bag. Fulham at home, just conceding 4 goals against Wolves, could actually be a decent fixture. I know Spurs are really disappointed against Ipswich, but usually I do like them in their home games. Then away against Bournemouth is a very difficult game. We've assessed that by now. Then Chelsea at home in game week 15. I think that could be okay. Southampton away in game week 16. Liverpool in 17. So a very, very mixed bag here. In terms of Bukayo Saka, away against West Ham, if we're going to assume that West Ham are going to continue their problems, I think that's a great fixture. Man United at home, a difficult one to predict under Amorim, but I would expect Arsenal to still have enough there to cause problems for Man United and most likely win that game comfortably. Then Fulham away, I mean, previously it was a tough game, but we saw what Wolves done to them. Then Everton at home and Palace away. So I think over the next 5 game weeks, Saka does have the better fixtures by far. And when we take a look at the underlying numbers, we need to remember that, of course, Son's played slightly less minutes, but I am basing this on per 90 minutes. So I do think we can come to some sort of conclusions on both of these players. Now, Saka has had 3.67 shots per 90 compared to Son's 2.1. So Son isn't this shot monster in this Spurs team anymore. He very much is more of a creative asset as opposed to that guy who's breaking the line and having those one-on-ones that we just historically have seen with Son. When we take a look at the shots in the box, this is the big problem for me. Son only 0.99 shots in the box per 90 compared to Saka's 2.87 per 90. I mean, you just can't compare the two. There's 0.2 million between them, and Saka is nearly having 2 shots more in the box per 90 minutes. It's ridiculous. You can also see shots in open play. Some of Son's are actually coming in set piece opportunities. Saka is actually pretty much open play. Big chances, it's worth noting, neither are actually getting significant big chances in their respective teams. And naturally, the expected goals and the expected assists are going to be in Saka's favour. So based on that, it just seems like a no-brainer. I sell Son, I bring in Saka, and I don't cause myself the headache of maybe not having Saka away against West Ham. I would like to keep Son for this home game against Fulham, but the more I look at these underlying numbers, the more I think to myself, am I just trying to cling on to the nostalgia of Son where he bags these hat-tricks in all the home games? It's worth noting he's had decent home returns, and I think the Spurs attack is actually really fruitful. But unless West Ham sack Lopetegui after the Monday night fixture, I think selling Son to Saka just makes a lot of sense, and I know that it's going to be a long-term move for my FPL team. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I think there is upside in holding Son, but with 2 free transfers, I think this is an actual move I need to make. So the other problem player that I spoke about in my team is going to be Raul Jimenez and Visser to an extent, but I think Visser for this game week actually holds some value at home against Leicester, whereas I think Raul Jimenez now, we're starting to get into a problem area where he isn't necessarily performing on the pitch to the level we want for certainty of minutes, because he is coming off around 75 minutes, and that just isn't great. Now, João Pedro and Delap offer alternatives to Raul Jimenez. They're now all the same price, and I think it's always naturally the case where when we have cheap forwards, you're always going to get pros and you get cons, and that is going to be the same for both João Pedro and Liam Delap. It isn't just a case of now both of these are phenomenal options and significantly better than that of Raul Jimenez. Now, take a look at the fixtures coming up for both teams right now. In terms of Brighton, and obviously João Pedro is kind of the shiny toy right now that everybody wants to own. Southampton at home in game week 13 looks fantastic. Southampton have no real desire to defend, so this is a great fixture. Then Fulham away in game week 14, difficult one to predict. Then Leicester with a potential new manager could be more difficult than expected. Then Palace at home, then West Ham. I really do like those fixtures on balance. In terms of Ipswich, Forest away isn't ideal. Palace, Bournemouth are great. Wolves actually isn't terrible, and I think Newcastle at home is not a bad fixture either. So I would actually argue these fixtures are pretty damn equal. Now, when we take a look at the underlying numbers for both of these players, it is worth noting that João Pedro has been injured for a lot of this season. So even though we're looking at per 90 minutes, Delap has played significantly more minutes. So I think we can come to more conclusions on Delap than that of João Pedro. But when we look at the total shots per 90, very, very similar. 2.19 for João Pedro, 2.08 for Liam Delap. Shots on target, basically identical. When we look at the XG, pretty identical, 0.56 for João Pedro, 0.46 for Delap. The one thing I do want to note here is in terms of the creativity in their respective teams. João Pedro attempted 1.46 per 90 assists. Delap only 0.83. And we probably would expect that with João Pedro being more of a number 10 and Delap being just much more of a traditional number 9. But the big thing I want to note here is not only is João Pedro's expected FPL points significantly more than Delap's, but his bonus points here. Now, I mentioned Delap's more of a forward, João Pedro more of a 10, and that really does help João Pedro's baseline, because if you look at the far column, the baseline bonus points, 8.27 for João Pedro, which basically means when he kicks off, he is unbelievable. He's head and shoulders above everybody else in that Brighton team, which means if he gets an attack in return, he picks up a bonus point. Whereas Delap does a lot of bad stuff. So you can see why he's actually in the negatives when he kicks off. And that's bad because he has to do a lot. He has to get a brace or a goal and assist just to have a chance of picking up a bonus point. And you can see that with João Pedro. 2.68 bonus points per 90. So basically, if he plays, he's going to pick up a bonus point because he's just doing all the good stuff in that Brighton team, whereas Delap is struggling. Now, I think Delap could actually score more goals than João Pedro, but as an overall package, I think it's a no-brainer. I think João Pedro is your man. I don't think Delap is going to play 90 minutes every single week either, so the argument of going for Delap over João Pedro for minutes risk is probably not even a case either. So I think João Pedro is a no-brainer if you are looking for a budget forward. For me, though, it isn't just as easy as bringing in João Pedro, because I then have to actually take out one of my midfielders, and then it doesn't actually make a lot of sense. So João Pedro, absolutely the forward to go for. He's a forward that I want to bring in, and we'll touch on now how he could be integrated into the team if I did buy him. So what are my Game Week 13 transfer plans? Because as you can see, there are players that I want to bring into my team, and with 2 free transfers, I think we always get tempted to go really big with our moves. So when I take a look at my team, as I mentioned, if you said to me right now, I cannot make a transfer, then I would happily keep this team for Game Week 13. As we've discovered, Saka is a better player than Son. Could Son outscore Saka in this one game week in isolation at home against Fulham, while Saka is away against West Ham? Absolutely. But long-term wise, while I don't have any other problems in my team, I do think maybe for this game week in isolation, sometimes you're saying to yourself, yes, Son could outscore Saka this game week, but over the next 5, I'm confident that Saka is my man. Then maybe just making that move makes a lot of sense. Now, as I said, we need to wait for the Champions League to happen because all it takes is a reoccurrence of the Saka injury, and then keeping Son makes a lot of sense. But if we were right now saying to ourselves that both players are available, I do think just bringing in Saka long-term probably makes a lot of sense for my team, and it'll leave me with 1.1 million. Now, we spoke about the situation with João Pedro. He is being to be highly bought. His price will rise once again, I'm certain of it. So if I brought in João Pedro right now, how would that actually look for my team? Because we're speaking about me selling Raul Jimenez, bringing in João Pedro, but I look at my starting 11 and say, who would I actually take out of that 11? I think you could argue Garnacho because if you're worried about the minutes, but if I think he's going to play 80 minutes, I don't mind keeping Garnacho and not bringing in João Pedro. Then in terms of my forwards, there's no chance that I'm starting João Pedro over someone like Acuna right now. So the big thing is Vissa versus João Pedro. And even if I'm deliberating not starting Vissa, then I think the answer is actually selling Vissa for João Pedro for the home game against Southampton. But again, do I have certainty that João Pedro is going to play the full 90? No. Do I think Vissa probably plays 70? I think the answer is yes. But Vissa, we've seen at home, has a phenomenal track record. And I think even though João Pedro really looks like a fantastic option for our FPL teams, I just don't know if he is actually a huge upgrade on the players that I have for this specific game week. So that's still a big decision for me to make. And I do like the idea of actually rolling my second transfer going into game week 14, because when we look at game week 14, for my team, it ain't looking good. We have some tough fixtures and I don't really have the optimal players. Now, of course, if I was to sell Raul Jimenez for João Pedro and make that move, then we can see at the bottom here, the fixture ticker, Brighton actually do play up against Fulham away. And I wouldn't say that's a phenomenal fixture for João Pedro, but I probably would play him over someone like a Vissa away against Aston Villa. But it's a tough game week. Man United versus Arsenal, and just other icky fixtures along the way. So that's why I think maybe rolling my second transfer is actually quite a powerful move. And it will allow me in game week 14 to ride out any potential transfers. And we also need to remember it's a midweek game. So we could see some potential rotation, some injuries arise that might require that second transfer. So as of right now, I think Son to Saka is the move that makes a lot of sense to my team. And then rolling the second transfer and just accepting if João Pedro goes off, he goes off. I have 2 good players with home fixtures. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Would you make the same moves or would you do something slightly different? Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's Game Week 13 transfer plans video. As you can see, plenty of options available, and I will be making my move on Friday, most likely. I'll let these Champions League games happen, let the Europa League games happen, and then reassess. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you drop a like, and of course, smash that subscribe button. We're coming into the busiest stage of the season right now, so this is the time to subscribe if you haven't already, because we are going to have deadlines each and every weekend, followed by weekdays, so it's going to be carnage. As always, if you have any questions, pop them in the comment section. I'll be sure to answer them, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.